Welcome to our Provideam Release 4.3 New Features training video. In this video presentation, we will show you some of the new features being made available in Provideam Release 4.3. These include new general features, new user features, new event monitoring and alarming features, and new OEE monitoring features. New general features include login timeout adjustment and improved database backup tools. If you navigate to the Provideam admin page on the services pane, you will see a new login timeout adjustment. This is the time in seconds of inactivity for a user, after which the user will be logged out. You now have the ability to modify this setting. Moving on to database maintenance, we have a new look database maintenance interface where we have separated the scheduled and the immediate database backup. So first, the immediate database backup, you select a folder on your PC for the backup, and clicking the backup now initiates the backup routine, and the backup will be stored in the folder you have specified. The scheduled backup is for ongoing maintenance, where you can schedule at regular intervals a database backup to be taken to preserve your settings and data during the lifetime of the application. The database backup scheduled maintenance application is controlled by the task scheduler, so you must ensure that the task scheduler is running to use the scheduled backup facility. The user section has been largely updated. User feature improvements include custom start page for user groups. Users can be members of multiple user groups. Users can have multiple contact details. Users can have a complex login password. And we've added a new contact lists feature, which allows us to better manage Provideam report emailing and event SMS alarming. So if we navigate to the user groups section, we will see that there is a new default page tab. And if we click on this, we will see that we can select a module and a page within that module. And once we save this setting, any user who is a member of this group, when they log on, they will be directed to this page. If we now look at the users section, we can see that it is possible to select multiple user groups. So when the user logs on, they will assume the rights of all the user groups that they're associated with. We also see that there is a complex password checkbox. By checking this checkbox, we enforce a more complex password regime on the user. This means that they're going to have to use a mix of capital letters, numerals, and symbols in their password. Now, looking at contact details, we can associate a number of email addresses, mobile or cell phone numbers, and pagers to the one user. Here I'm showing 2 email addresses associated to the one user. Now let's look at the contact list feature. This feature allows us to create user lists of email addresses, pager numbers, or mobile/cell phone numbers, which can then be used when we schedule reports by email or we send event alarms by SMS, text message, or pager number. Here I'm creating an email user list for the assembly user group. I bring up the contacts page, I show all my contacts, and I select the contacts that I want to be in this contacts list. So now if I go to my reporting section and I have a report that I want to send to a list of users by email, I can select my contact lists rather than individual users. I can also select a combination of both, but it's going to be much easier to manage an individual contact list rather than multiple users, so that when a user joins or leaves the company, we only have to manage the contact list, not the multiple reports we may have for a particular user group. Now I'm going to create an alarm SMS messaging group, which we will use with event alarms. Select to show all. I have one created. I select this. So this is a simple case where there is only one address or phone number in my contacts list. And then when I go to my event group and choose a particular event group, I can specify so we're seeing here that this is an alarm group and that the alarm has been activated. And here I'm specifying that I want these alarms to be sent to my contact list. I could send it to an email and mobile contact list and individual users. So here I choose just to send it to email. So now we're going to look at some of the event monitoring and alarming features. We have added some new system alarms, OPC quality and service stopped alarming, and we've improved the event report charts. So going back to our event groups, we can see that there are two event groups at the start here: Services OPC Alarm Event Group and the Alarm Event Group. Both of these have a negative ID, -11 and -10, we can see from our overall data table here. We have a group name. We can see that the events within this group are associated with our two data collection services, our event monitoring service and our OEE monitoring service. So the purpose of this OPC alarm event group is to monitor the quality of OPC being recorded by these two data collection services. I have the alarm configured to high. So what this means is when we get bad OPC quality in one of these services, an alarm will be created. We can then associate this alarm with a contact list to have the alarm sent out by SMS or email or pager to the technicians who can correct any OPC problem that we're experiencing. The second inbuilt system event alarm is monitoring whether services are being run or not. So if a service is stopped, this inbuilt service system event will monitor that status and will create an alarm. So as we've seen in our user section, we can select the individuals who are going to receive an alarm based on these system alarm events. Now looking at event reporting. If we look at the current status of the analog values and click on one of the values, we see a trend of that item over the day. And then if we zoom in on a section of the chart, we can see the item trending over that period. We have now increased the resolution of these values so that the chart is being drawn much more accurately. Here, looking at digital values, again, we can zoom in to a much higher resolution than we would have been able to in the past. Now looking at our new OEE features, if we look at the configuration of Provideam, we've added batch flex fields, we've added an hour and shift resolution option for manual mode entry, we've entered filtering modes and yields so that only active items are selectable in the manual entry pages, and we've added a time zone feature to machine properties. First, we're going to look at flex fields. Flex fields are a feature which allow us to record additional information which we don't normally record within Provideam as part of our batch record. So we have standardized flex field names created which we can use, and our first task is to change the name of these standardized flex fields to names that we want to use in our application. So to do that, I've navigated to the dictionary module and I've created a new copy of the standard English dictionary, which I've called FlexField English. And then I scroll down through my OEE logic fields, my dictionary keys, and I edit the flex field names that I want to use for my application. So I'm going to change flex field 1 to temperature and flex field 2 to pressure. Once I've made this change, I need to associate this dictionary with the application and with the users in the application. So the first thing is to make this the default application. So I go to Provideam Admin, and instead of our standardized English dictionary, I'm going to use our FlexField English dictionary. I need also to set the users who are going to use this dictionary to use the FlexField English dictionary. So the next time I log in as a user from the admin user group, I will be using the FlexField English dictionary. So I choose now the machine that I want to collect additional information for, and I open the FlexField section, and I see my FlexField names. Because I'm going to enter them using the user interface, I select Modify for temperature in this case. And I'll also choose the assembly machine. I'll show flex fields and choose Modify, in this case for the two flex fields, pressure and lot temperature. Now I must change the setting from NA to OPC or dB. In this case, because I'm going to be entering through the user interface, I'm going to change them to dB. If they were coming automatically from your OPC interface, then you would change them to OPC. Looking at my manual entry, you will now see that temperature is part of the batch record. So I can add that information here, and it becomes part of the batch/shift record. We can also see it in our automatic machines. And we can enter values in the same way through the current status page. There is an additional step, however, which hasn't been carried out here, which is because it is an automatic machine, you need to update the service which collects the data, the Provideam OEE Mon service, because initially the flex fields were initially set to NA, and now we need them to be set to DB. So we need to restart the OEE Mon service to reflect the new data collection setting for the flex fields. So we've now restarted the OEE Mon service. We can go back to the dashboard, and this time when we enter data for the flex fields, because they're set to batch, when we save, they will be updated and become part of the data collection routine for the machine. Now if we look at reporting and we select our manual machine, and we select more details, we can add details of our flex fields into the report. So these fields can be added to the report, so we can report on the data that we have collected through the flex fields. So we can see temperature of lot is now part of our report. And we can do exactly the same for our automatic machine. In this case, we're selecting two flex fields, temperature and pressure. And we can see the two values are displayed on our report. So the next thing we want to look at for our manual machine is our ability to change the resolution of our data entry from hour, which has been our standard heretofore, to shift. When it's set to shift, we're only going to collect one record for the whole period, whereas when it is set to hour, we collect records for every hour. In addition, we now look at the machine station counts, and we see there is an active flag. If the active flag is set off, the counts or modes will not be available through the manual entry pages. Only counts which are active can be collected on the manual entry pages. So the first thing we notice when we go to our manual entry page is there is now only one record for our shift for the yield entry. This is because we have set yield resolution to shift, whereas we left the mode resolution to hour. We also notice that the defect, which was unchecked from being active, is now not available. And similarly, when we unchecked one of our modes, it's now unavailable also. The next feature we want to show you is the manual yield feature for automatic machines. This feature allows us to add manual yield data to the automatically collected machine data for automatic machines. So the first thing we need to do is add some defect information which is not collected automatically but which is collected manually through the manual yield page. So adding a manual defect value, we see that the defect has been created. We go back to our dashboard, but still we don't have any values to be selectable. So we go back to our machine admin and correct our entry. Instead of DB, in this case, we need to use DB manual. The standard DB is used in the case where a script is writing the value to the database, whereas in this case we are entering the value through the user interface. So we now see that there are records available that we can edit for the manual yield entry, one for each hour of the shift, and we can add our yield values as shown on screen. And we can have multiple yield values here, so you could create as many defect values as you want to record. The next thing I want to show you is that there is now a time zone setting. The purpose of this setting is to facilitate corporate users who are using one instance of Provideam to collect data for plants in a number of time zone locations. The key thing here is Provideam data collection is done on server time. So now let's take a look at some new features of the OEE monitoring dashboard. The first is a current shift filter, and the second is manual entry of yield values on the dashboard. So now looking at the current shift filter, the overall data table shows us all the shifts relating to the machines for a particular day. When we select the current shift filter, we only see the current shifts. Unchecking, we see all the shifts. This is also visible in the molding demo data section, where we have a number of Wednesday day shifts relating to the molding machine, and then when we click the current, we only see the one that's currently active. Now looking at the manual yield feature, we see that there is one manual defect already created. We'll create another one here, manual defect 2. Declare it as a defect. Make sure it's active so it will be selectable. Note that the first manual defect is set to db_manual. We need to change manual defect 2 to be the same. We're now opening the manual yield page. Note that we have the ability to enter manual yield values hour by hour for the pack machine, and we can see that we can select either manual defect or manual defect 2 and add values for the current shift for those defect types. Now looking at our yield resolution setting, we have two options, hour or shift. If we set to shift, we will only get one yield entry per shift. If we set to hour, then we will get an hour by hour breakdown. So we have now set it to shift, and we can see that there is only one record for the complete shift. So all our yield values go into the same record. Changing back to hour. So one other thing to note when using the manual yield is to ensure that you have user security set appropriately. So on the OEE monitoring section, scroll down and make sure that the dashboard manual yield access setting has been set for the user you want to use this feature. So the last thing we want to look at in the OEE monitoring section is reporting. We now have a choice of analysis type, we have a choice of chart resolution, and we have some new operator productivity functions. So firstly, we're looking at analysis type. We have an overall setting here of OEE or downtime analysis type for the application. This sets the default mode of analysis for our application. Not every user will want to monitor OEE values. We now see that instead of OEE monitoring admin, we have DT, standing for downtime monitoring admin. We also have a similar setting for the area, because in this new version of Provideam, we can actually have different settings for different areas. So if we look at our dashboard for molding, which has been set to downtime, we see that the range of functions are not OEE functions, but are general downtime functions. So we're looking at uptime, downtime, planned downtime, rather than the OEE functions of OEE availability and quality. In the reporting section, we have also the choice of analysis type. When we select OEE, we default to OEE functions. When we select downtime, we're going to default to downtime functions. Now, to show some of the new functions that have been made available in this version, we have operator time, operator productivity, standard operator time, standard operator productivity, and relative operator productivity. Operator productivity being a function of the number of operators used to make a product by the time associated with making the product. So when we want to track the number of operators being used to make a product, we set our data source to dB or OPC. We set it to dB if we want to modify it via script or via the Provideam user interface. And on our display setting, we choose, in this case, modify, so that we can modify it through our current status page on the dashboard. Because we have changed from NA to dB for the data source for the operators used, we must restart the OEE monitoring service. Now on the dashboard, we have an opportunity to change the operators used value for the pack machine. The operators used is to refer to the actual number of operators used. There is also a setting for the standard number, which will be a pre-configured value for the machine. The standard operators used is set in the machine part relationship table. So we see for the 3 parts available for our pack machine, we have 3 different settings for standard operators used. We note that the default part is being run on the machine at present, and the standard number of operators used for the default part is 1. If we then go to report on the pack machine and include our operators used functions, and our standard operators used functions, we can see the operator time, the operator productivity, and then also the standard operator time. So the next thing we want to show is the chart resolution feature. So traditionally we've had one option for chart resolution. Now we have a number which you can select depending on the size of your display resolution. So we can see the chart we have selected pretty much fills our screen. And if we go back and revert to the standard, we can see the chart size is much smaller. So depending on your screen resolution, you can choose a chart resolution to suit. So the next thing we want to show you is the reintroduction of the plan adherence module. Plan adherence is a plugin which is an adjunct to the OEE monitoring module. Here I'm showing a list of plans which have been created for the molding machine 1. Some are completed, some are in production, and some are pending. Pending are plans which have not been put into production heretofore. We can enter plans manually or through a CSV file, or potentially from a scripted interface with your ERP system. When we generate a report on the information, we see a Gantt chart of our plans. The areas in red are production which has been completed, green are planned, and blue indicates in production and when we predict that the in production record will end. So we can see that the blue is extending beyond our green Gantt bar, which indicates that it's going to take longer based on our current value of OEE than we have planned for that production record to take. We link our plans to our production by using the same lot name in both cases. So molding machine 1 underscore lot 10 is the same name as we will use on our current production plan. This linking of lot names allows us to associate what we plan to make with what we've actually made on the machine. So thank you for watching this new Provideam Features video. If you'd like to discuss your project in any more detail with us, please don't hesitate to contact me, Paul Mitchell, at provideam.com.